Welcome to historic Swiss Avenue in Dallas, Texas. You've stepped back in time for a while. Beginning at the historic gates at Fitzhugh Street and Swiss Avenue, which designate the entrance to the neighborhood, you can view the original plan. Developed by Robert S. Munger and managed by son Collette beginning in 1905, almost 100 houses would comprise the dream by 1930. In 1857, Henri Bolle named Swiss Avenue after his native country. It was a dusty rural lane then. By the 1870s, Lower Swiss, the part closer to downtown, had been developed. Then, in 1905, Munger began development and set strict building regulations, long before zoning became routine, for houses built to maintain their prominence and integrity. The lots on the north side of the street cost more and had a private drive, 10 feet wide compared to the south side's public thoroughfare, which was 20. The sidewalks were paved with the best concrete, while the streets were covered with a softer material to accommodate horses' hooves. All homes had to be 2 stories tall and cost at least $10,000, a great deal of money in those days. They had to be set back a minimum of 60 feet from the curb and 10 feet from either lot line. No hedges or fences were allowed in front, and none higher than 3 feet on the side. All of the 106 homes on Swiss Avenue can tell a story. There is an abundance of information, both cultural and architectural. We've highlighted some of them here for you. Leaders in the world of finance, politics, religion, and the arts have chosen Swiss Avenue as their home over the years. And you will notice that not only do families live in the same house for decades, but several generations have grown up to live in other houses on the street. Now, let's begin our tour of what Robert Munger envisioned as a city man's home and the handsomest, most attractive and desirable residence district in the entire South. 4902 Swiss. This home was built in 1920 for $15,000 by Joseph Sheps, who also built a prosperous bakery and dairy business. It was purchased in 1923 by Dr. John Borland, one of the founders of Dallas Medical and Surgical Clinic and the inventor of the baby incubator. The architecture reflects the colonial revival style. Notice the unusual front door with matching side lights, which incorporate pointed Gothic arches into the window pattern. 4926 Swiss. Construction on this large home was completed in 1916. It was built by Shirley English, the first president of the Postal Telegraph Corporation, later a division of Western Union. He owned a private railroad car, which was pulled along a spur track existing in the alley at that time. Mr. English and his family were able to board the car conveniently from their home. The car was then shunted to the main railroad track, where it was attached to a train. In this way, the family traveled to other cities. One of the fine features of this well-constructed home are the roof tiles, made by Ludwici, a French tile firm, which has been in business over 800 years. 4946 Swiss. Built in 1913 as the residence of the Right Reverend Joseph Patrick Lynch, Roman Catholic Bishop of Dallas, this house was designed with an office downstairs and a chapel included in the upstairs. It originally contained many elaborate stained glass windows. Some still exist today. An excellent symmetrical prairie-style house. Note the heavy squared brick piers which support the front porch. These are very typical of the prairie style, which usually emphasize horizontal lines. The exterior paint design does a fine job of highlighting these aspects. Notice how deep the house is and how the architect chose to make it appear smaller from the street view. The exact opposite is true at the next house. 5002 Swiss. Built in 1913 by Rufus W. Higginbotham, one of Dallas's foremost merchants of the time. Mr. Higginbotham was a colorful personality, about whom many stories are told. And perhaps the best story is how Mr. Higginbotham saved his bank, one of the largest in Dallas. During the Great Depression, runs of massive customer withdrawals were typical, collapsing bank after bank. Mr. Higginbotham, in full view of the other customers, deposited $50,000 into his account, instilling confidence in them and ensuring the bank's solvency. Mr. Higginbotham's children grew up to own houses of their own on Swiss Avenue. The Higginbotham home was purchased in the 1940s by W. W. Snowden, an oil man, who for many years had a live nativity scene in front of the house during the Christmas season. Every year, 12 policemen were required to direct the thousands of people who came to see it. Designed by Lang & Witchell, one of the top local architectural firms, this is the best high-style prairie house in Dallas. Notice how the entrance door is not easily visible from the front of the house. Entrances that were obvious from the street were a pet peeve of Frank Lloyd Wright, who is credited with creating the prairie style. The two long horizontal lines formed by the cast stone copings, located beneath both the first and second-story windows, are also indicative of prairie style. The geometric leaded glass pattern in the upper part of the downstairs windows and the low, broad chimney are two more common Wright features, as well as his fondness for large, flat flower pots, which he planted with greenery to help integrate the house with nature. This house has retained most of its unique original flower pots. 5020 Swiss. In 1928, Rufus Higginbotham had a house built next door to him for his daughter, Nina Bell, and her husband Alpha Bogus, a banker. This is an informal, asymmetrical French eclectic house, standing today exactly as it was built, and is testament to superb design and construction. Steel framing in the foundation, as well as high-quality masonry work, define this home. Notice the high pitch of the roof, and the way the edge of the roof curves up and over the second-story windows in several places, where the window tops extend above the roofline. The house remained in the Bogus family for 37 years. Since that time, owners have included O.L. Nelms and Ray Hutchinson, former Republican Party state chairman and candidate for governor. Hutchinson's wife, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, is a current U.S. Senator. The couple was married in a private ceremony at this home in 1978. Television and movie productions such as Dallas and Hallmark Hall of Fame have featured this house as a location. Despite all the attention it's received over the last 65 years, this home remains warm and distinguished. 5112 Swiss. In 1927, Clarence Miller hired the architectural firm of Lang & Witchell to redesign this house after it had partially burned soon after completion in 1926. The result is another French eclectic house. But in contrast to the informal example we just saw, this is a very formal one. Note the very high pitch of the roof, typical of French houses. The French also loved features which extended through the roofline of the house. In the last house, we saw a graceful curve of the roofline over the windows. Here, we have very elegant through-the-cornice wall dormer instead. This means that part of the wall of the home extends up through the roofline to make a dormer. Note the side porch and porte-cochere, both of rusticated stone. 5302 Swiss. Built in 1918 by Fred Legg, Jr., first president of Magnolia Oil Company, now Mobil Oil, at a cost of $19,700, this house was originally craftsman in style. Remodeled in the 20s by noted architect Hal Thompson, the old-fashioned full-width porch was removed. The floor of the porch was left, creating a front terrace. He then added a very dominant front door surround with a large broken triangular pediment that clearly shouts out, "Now I am a colonial revival house." It is also reportedly the first air-conditioned house in Dallas. Air was drawn in by fans and cooled by passing over blocks of ice in the basement. Ducts were used to distribute the cooled air, and a sump pump removed the water from the melted ice. 5314 Swiss. In 1916, E.R. Brown, civic leader and founder of Magnolia Oil, hired architect Hal Thompson to design his home. Mrs. Brown wanted their new house to resemble homes she had seen on the Italian Riviera. She felt the Dallas climate was similar to that of the Mediterranean, and so it was designed and built at a whopping cost of $23,500. Mr. Brown named his new oil company Magnolia Oil, after a favorite tree he could see from his dining room window. The Browns lived in this home for over 60 years. This is one of Hal Thompson's finest houses. The ancient Romans invented the arch, and Italian Renaissance architects had a fondness for incorporating them. Thompson included them in the curved glass and metal entry canopy, the full-length windows across the front facade, the two dormers, and in the elegant arcaded and colonnaded side porch. 5400 Swiss. Built in 1908 by Colette Munger, manager of Munger Place. The home was a boarding house after World War II, and then fell into disrepair, as did many of the houses on the street. The current owner has completely restored the home to its original configuration. This house combines elements of the two early modern styles, Prairie and Craftsman. The porch railings are important decorative features on this house. The one on the upper porch is very Craftsman in feeling, and the one across the first floor is unique in incorporating small keystones into its design. If you stop and think about it, usually keystones are seen over windows or at the top of arches, not in porch railings. The house is given further distinction through the use of exposed rafters with shaped ends and heavy brackets. Another notable feature is the large-scale single-hung windows with leaded glass transoms flanking the leaded glass doors on the front facade. The transoms are unique because they open by sliding up into the wall above. The house has a side hall plan, and its corner lot location provided Mr. Munger with a business entrance for his clients on the side of the house. 5412 Swiss. Built in 1915 by W.H. Julian, this Italian Renaissance-style house started out with a tiny front porch. Later, another owner had a grand front terrace added. Cross Parkmount Street to the next house. 5500 Swiss. The Aldrich House, as it is now known, is owned by the Dallas County Medical Wives Auxiliary and is not a residence. The house was donated to the auxiliary in 1975 by Rena Aldrich, a member of the Munger family, after she had lived in it with her family for almost 50 years. The house was built in 1917 by rancher banker W.J. Lewis for his 18-year-old bride, who did not care for it, despite its elegance, and the house was soon sold after completion to banker George N. Aldrich and his wife Rena. Another of Hal Thompson's refined eclectic-era designs, this home combines the simple shape of a symmetrical French eclectic house with more formal French Beaux Arts elements. Note the pair of oval dormers on the roof, the use of decorative ironwork, and the handsome two-story stone entrance design which incorporates many familiar elements in an inventive way. Beaux Arts influence is seen in the many swags and other floral decoration. This grand home with its French doors and colonnaded wings was the first home of the Ewing family in the pilot for the famous TV series Dallas. It will revert back to a single residence when and if it is sold again. Cross Beacon Street for the next house on the tour. 5600 Swiss. This is the only duplex located on historic Swiss Avenue. Each floor has approximately 2,300 square feet. 5622 Swiss. Built in 1919 by R.A. Furlow, this colonial revival-style house is an example of keeping the house in the family by passing it on to the next generation. 5640 Swiss. Dallas architect W.J. Lang of the firm Lang & Witchell built this house for his family in 1925. Spanish eclectic in style, notice the ornate relief work around the entry and the iron balconies above the door and below the large arched stair window. To proceed to the next house on the tour, cross Glendale Street. 5736 Swiss. Designed by Bertram Hill in 1923 for W.O. Womack, the house is Italian Renaissance in style, but built of the dark red brick associated with the Georgian Revival style. Wallace Savage and his family lived here during the years he was mayor of Dallas, between 1949 and 1951. There is an underground tunnel which connects the house to the indoor pool in the backyard. 5750 Swiss. Designed by J.W. Hansel in 1923 for J.H. Chrysler, this house would remain with the original owners until 1959. It is a perfect example of an eclectic-era house. The design mixes several elements, but no one style dominates. Much of the house is Mediterranean in feel, while the massive wooden front door with its large hinges and small window is typical of Tudor homes. In 1938, the home was occupied by Chrysler's daughter and her husband, J. Woodall Rogers, one of Dallas's most influential mayors, and the first one to win 2 terms in office between 1939 and 1947. Cross Skillman to the next house on the tour. 5822 Swiss. This house was built in 1924 at a price of $17,500 for C.D. White by Marshall Barnett. The form of the house is Tudoresque, but with a Mediterranean-influenced, triple-arched front porch. The current owners are part of the Higginbotham family, who built several houses on the street. This branch of the family has lived in this house since 1950. 5928 Swiss. Built in 1925 for J.D. Van Winkle, the presumed architects were Fucci and Cheek. This is a handsome Italian Renaissance house with projecting side wings, tiled roof, and triple arches on the entrance porch. 6102 Swiss. Built in 1924 at a cost of $15,000, this was the home of Carr P. Collins, founder of Bailey & Collins Insurance Company, whose territory spanned over 10 states. His family was very influential in Texas. Son Jim was a congressman for several years, and Carr Collins Jr. was on the board of governors at Southern Methodist University. The house is basically Tudor in style, as seen in the dominant parapeted front-facing gable and the elaborated chimney, but it has a triple-arched Italian Renaissance porch, added for good measure. Now, please make a U-turn and come back down the avenue to the next house on the tour, 6011 Swiss. This house, built in 1924 by I. Britton, was held by its first owners until 1987. This lovely, understated Tudor-style house has been carefully restored, maintaining its architectural integrity. Notice the Tudor arch of the entrance porch. It looks like a pointed Gothic arch that has been flattened out. Notice also the casement window with the diamond-shaped panes, typical of Tudor-style houses. This is because when original Tudor houses were being built in England, it was not possible to make large panes of glass. Therefore, many small panes of glass had to be assembled to make a large window, and this small diamond pane pattern was the most common way of accomplishing this. 5901 Swiss. Built in 1924 at a price of $17,500 by C.A. Tucker, this home has been the residence of the Reverend W.A. Criswell, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas, since 1944. The home is owned by the church. It is a Tudor-style house, very similar in form to 6011 Swiss. Notice the same Tudor-arched entry porch, but here the house is executed in buff-colored brick with buff stone trim, a color scheme similar to its next-door neighbor. The ornate grillwork over the front door and windows was added in the 1950s. 5803 Swiss. Built in 1922, this was first the home of A.L. Neiman, then Carrie Neiman Marcus, both founding members of the world-renowned Neiman Marcus retail stores. This is a pleasant Tudor house with its original slate roof and slate-covered dormer. The elegant glass entry hood suspended over the front entrance is not typical of this style, but rather of the Beaux Arts. Cross Skillman to the next house on the tour. 5731 Swiss. Theodore Marcus, one of the Neiman Marcus family, built this house in 1919. When the current owners purchased the house in 1971, they bought the 2 vacant lots adjacent to the house. The vacant lots cost more than their home because the sellers thought the house would be torn down. Typical thought during that time period when many houses on Swiss Avenue were in major disrepair. However, the new owners not only renovated their home, but were very instrumental in getting Swiss Avenue designated as a protected historic area. Notice how similar this house is in shape and inspiration to the first Hal Thompson house you saw at 5314 Swiss Avenue. It has the same side entrance with a rounded top porch and 2 full-length arched windows opening onto the front terrace. 5703 Swiss. Built in 1917 by P.A. Ritter, it was sold in 1921 to Will Harris Sr., an attorney who gained statewide recognition for successfully prosecuting Texas Governor James Ferguson, which resulted in the governor's impeachment. Mr. Harris raised his family in this home. His daughter still lives here today with her husband, Wallace Savage, a former Dallas mayor during the time of the opening of Central Expressway. They were also significant in the movement to establish Swiss Avenue as a historic district. Their daughter Virginia, another active participant in the avenue's preservation and renowned author of many architectural books, grew up here and went on to raise her own children in another house on Swiss Avenue, making 4 generations of this family who have called this street home. The shaped mission-style parapet on the dormer of this house is the shape of the one at the Alamo. Originally, this house would have been immediately identifiable as a Mission Revival house, as it had a larger matching Alamo parapet centered above the entrance to the front porch. Cross Glendale Street to the next house on the tour. 5647 Swiss. This house built in 1916, and the house next door at 5643 Swiss, built in 1917, are typical local examples of prairie-style houses. 5619 Swiss. Built in 1918 by E.P. Greenwood, the architect is Bertram Hill. Designed in the Italian Renaissance style, the second owner insisted that the large columns from her former house be installed at her new house on Swiss Avenue. The tremendous weight of the additions caused the front porch to sink, and the house took on a neoclassical style. Cross Beacon Street to the next house on the tour. 5527 Swiss. This house was built in 1985 by noted Dallas architect Cole Smith. Meeting all of the strict landmark standards, this red brick colonial revival-style house is compatible in design and appearance with the older homes on the street. The original home, built on this site in 1917, was torn down before historic designation took place on Swiss Avenue. This house features an elliptical fanlight over the front door and an oversized round window above. Triangle Park. So named for its shape. Markers tell the story briefly of Swiss Avenue's place in history. Families come here to relax and visit with friends. You may want to stop for a minute and stretch your legs. 5439 Swiss. Built in 1916 by G.C. Greer, a lawyer and later a president of Magnolia Petroleum Company, this home has always been well cared for. The next owner, John Sainer, in banking, lumber, and railroading, owned a mahogany plantation in the Philippines. A boatload of mahogany was shipped over for mantels and woodwork throughout the house. The following owner was Curry McCutcheon, a noted criminal attorney. His family lived in this house for over 30 years and hosted many politicians and artists during that time. Another of Hal Thompson's fine Italian Renaissance houses, this one has a triple-arched entrance and colonnaded porches on each side of the grand terrace. Yet, in a typical Thompson twist, he has used the dark red brick common on colonial revival houses and has added both keystone lintels and shutters to the windows for even more colonial revival flavor. 5405 Swiss. Hamilton M. Munger built his house directly across the street from his brother's house in 1915. Hamilton was not only a farmer and an oil man, but he was the architect of his home as well. It is reported that after Munger sold the house and during Prohibition, a speakeasy and gambling parlor operated from this address. Dozens of telephone lines run into the house, and Pool House seem to validate these rumors. It was during this time that Swiss Avenue endured one of its declining periods. However, during the 50s, the exterior walls and columns were painted blue to match another owner's Thunderbird convertible, and it was featured in a House and Garden magazine article at that time. The home has undergone extensive restoration to return it to its original character. This house features a Tudor roof and a colonial revival front door, which was a favorite eclectic-era combination. Tudor elements include the false thatched roof with its rolled edge and the half-timbering that is barely visible in each front gable. The broken triangular pediment above the front door is a colonial revival element. 5323 Swiss. This stately residence was built in 1916 for $50,000 by Frank J. Thole, a pioneer in oil development and co-founder of Thole Brothers Meat Market. Hal Thompson was again at work as the architect of this house, this time putting his refined signature on the colonial revival style. This high-style example features a centered gable with a delicate round window in the triangular gable and a broad band of elaborate trim below. The windows are in large groupings, and upstairs have decorative iron balconettes beneath. This home has changed owners only once, in 1993. The second owner was given the original house contract and blueprints. 5303 Swiss. This was the first house built on historic Swiss Avenue in 1905. It is also the first house to undergo massive restoration to reclaim its glory. When Dr. Raleigh W. Baird purchased the lot and announced plans to build his home, Swiss Avenue was immediately annexed into Dallas, having formerly been in the city of East Dallas. It is a perfect example of the neoclassical style. The full-height entry porch combined with a lower full-width porch is a variant of the neoclassical style found almost exclusively in the South. Southerners couldn't live without their full-width porches, but just couldn't give up the majesty of the colossal two-story columns at the entrance. And this is the result. Notice the elaborate Corinthian capitals, the transoms over the broad first-floor windows, and the upstairs porch over the entry. In addition to Dr. Baird, first owner and co-founder of Dallas Medical and Surgical Clinic along with neighbor Dr. Borland, other notable owners of this house have included J.C. Muse, general counsel for the Belo Corporation and the Dallas Morning News. This home has remained in the same family since its restoration from its dilapidated state as a boarding house. It is impeccably maintained inside and out. It is also a favorite location for film and TV crews as well as print media. The beautiful veranda is often the backdrop of commercials and catalogs. The owners were instrumental in the mission to designate Swiss Avenue as a historic area and continue to be actively involved in the street's destiny today. 5205 Swiss. Built in 1919 by department store owner S.L. Dijsterbach for $20,000, this is the fifth house designed by Hal Thompson on Swiss Avenue. It is Italian Renaissance in style, with a recessed entry, fronted by newer iron grillwork. Cross Munger Boulevard to the next house on the tour. 5125 Swiss. Built in 1915, this house is a fine example of the mission-style house and features shaped parapets, or ornamental walls, extending above the roofline that is so typical of that style. Notice also the smooth stucco walls and green-tiled visor roof. The windows are true to the style with their large single pane in the bottom half, coupled with the pattern design above. 5017 Swiss. Built in 1907 by R.W. Fote for $15,000, this house has quite a long history. While it established a high standard for other houses by being constructed of expensive masonry instead of wood, it has survived through more than a dozen owners. A fire which destroyed a large corner of the roof, which was then left open to the elements for several years, and finally, careful restoration that has brought this beautiful home back to life. The house is prairie in style and features unique Sullivan-esque relief ornaments on the panel between the second-story windows and a band of trim under the eaves. 5007 Swiss. This Mediterranean brick house was moved to Swiss Avenue in 1983 from Swiss Avenue and Orem Street, 9 blocks away. The amazing feat was accomplished by removing all of the exterior brick and window panes, lifting the house from its foundation with heavy cranes, and placing it on a flatbed truck lined with inflated tires. Once settled on the site, new brick was laid on the exterior and the original windows were reinstalled. Later owners would greatly increase the size of the house. The architect was Clarence Bulger, known for his design of the Fair Park Lagoon and Dallas's first steel skyscraper. Built in 1923 for Wesley Porter Mason of Mason Engineering Company, it was Mrs. Mason who brought social prominence to the home through her sponsorship of musical tours of famous European musicians. Certainly highlights were performances in the music room of Fritz Kreisler and Sergei Rachmaninoff. Mrs. Mason also taught piano, and Van Cliburn was one of her many students. This house has had only 3 owners. 5001 Swiss. Even though this house was built in 1986 and is the last house built on the street, it is compatible in style and appearance with the older homes, but features all the amenities of new construction. Of interesting note, there was a house constructed here in 1908 in the middle of a triple lot. It was built for $20,000 by C.C. Weichsel, chairman of the board of Dallas National Bank. He willed his house to the Episcopal Diocese of Dallas, which, not being able to use it for school purposes, had it demolished for tax reasons. The 3 lots were made into 2. One house was moved here, and another built on the other lot and a half. 4949 Swiss. Often called the Queen of Swiss Avenue, this grand house was built in 1918 for $25,000 by J.R. Tennyson. Designed by architect W.H. Reeves, this majestic place carries an impeccable pedigree. Tennyson, a man of high social profile, sold the house to William W. Caruth, a member of one of the earliest pioneer families in Dallas. The family lived here for many years. Their daughter Mattie married Harold Bird in one of the front parlors. Her wedding dress is now part of the permanent costume collection at the Hall of States at Fair Park. John Logan purchased the house in 1949. His daughter Mary Ellen was a leading fashion model at the time. She was voted the most beautiful woman in America by Life magazine. She was also the model for the statues along the esplanade at Fair Park. Mary Ellen married Danish Baron Christian Benson, and they continued to live in the house and raise their own family. Baron Benson was well-traveled and had accompanied Lawrence of Arabia on his adventure through the desert. Mrs. Benson still lives here. This impressive, one-of-a-kind house combines large squared prairie-style porch supports and broad overhanging eaves with a false thatched roof applied to the main roof, 2 front-facing gables, and a large gabled dormer. The double front door and leaded glass side lights are especially handsome. 4937 Swiss. Built in 1917 by Jesse David Patchett for a cost of $16,500. Mr. Patchett was a co-founder of Patchett Brothers Leather Goods. During World War I, he designed and produced medical packs for the Army. Enemy agents planted dynamite under the house in an effort to stop Mr. Patchett's work, but it was discovered before it could explode. In 1952, Martin M. Crane, a former lieutenant governor of Texas, purchased the house. His family lived here for 27 years and put the house on the first home tour to raise money to save the neighborhood. The house is prairie in style and is embellished with cast stone ornaments. 4933 Swiss. This house was a wedding present built in 1912 for Charles S. Berry and his wife Carrie Patchett. Mr. Berry served as Secretary-Treasurer for the Murray Company, a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The senior Patchett family also owned another home at 5421 Swiss, making 3 houses on Swiss Avenue owned by the same extended family. The only other family to beat this number of family-owned houses at one time was the Higginbothams, who owned 4 at one point. The current owners purchased the home in 1992. During their extensive remodeling, the owners discovered memorabilia placed between the walls. The items are now on display in the dining room and include an 1887 prayer book and a handwritten check from Mrs. Berry. The low-pitched hipped roof, deep eaves, and horizontal emphasis are typical of a prairie-style house. You've returned to the block where you began your turn-of-the-century odyssey. Original and unique are words that aptly describe both the houses and the residents of historic Swiss Avenue. It is a diversity that has worked well to help shape the character of a city, well prepared for the 3rd millennium. Swiss Avenue has come full circle in its evolution over the century, still maintaining a standard which it will undoubtedly carry on for the next 100 years or so. We hope you have enjoyed this tour as much as we have enjoyed producing it for you.